Activate your energy.
Welcome to the Activated Authors Podcast, a show where we distill the core principles of what it takes to become a happy, healthy, and productive author, no matter what stage of the journey you're at. I'm your host, Daniel Willcocks. I'm an international best-selling author, as well as an author coach, speaker, and creative entrepreneur. But most importantly, I'm a lifelong student of all things productivity, psychology, and human behavior. Thank you for joining me for today's episode. Without further ado, let's dive in. What is up, Activators? And welcome back to another episode of the Activated Authors Podcast with myself, Daniel Willcocks. And here with me every week is...
It's Samantha Frost. It sounds like you've been drinking the alcohols.
I mean, there's no way that you can prove or disprove that theory.
This is true, but I've been with you all day and I know you haven't had a drink.
I could be real sneaky.
Oh, that means you've got a problem.
So how are we doing, Sam?
Well, touch. I was about to say touch all the wood, but that opens some things. Currently, right now, considering the weekend I've had, I'm doing wonderful.
Yes.
I had a very big bout of like
tempestuous.
It was horrendous, just fully vomiting from exhaustion and all the rest of it. So that wasn't great, but I've been able to take medicine and keep food down today. So I'm great. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good.
Yeah?
Yeah. Things personal-wise haven't relented, but we were having a conversation earlier, just mentally in an okay place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's frustrating because there is a lot of stuff that, as per usual, I cannot talk about. But one of the main things I've been focusing on the last few weeks has been sleep, has been exercise, has been food.
You've been doing really well with the sleep and the exercise in particular.
Not so much with the food, but I have re-employed my sister, Food Freedom with Becca, as a nutritionist to keep me accountable and to do that kind of stuff again. And that kicked off this week, and we're slowly kind of rolling into stuff because so much of improvement comes with taking the small steps to start. And so the main thing that I'm focusing on, even though I'm not eating any better yet, is just, for me at the minute, it's just remembering to log meals and stuff.
Yeah.
And just once I can get into that and kind of forgive myself again for like, you know, because it takes time to change stuff and it's not easy. So my main focus this week is log in the food, stick to like some of the main bits. And then next week I'm really kind of knuckling down on that. But like, it's helping in many ways, as are, again, a few other things that probably can't really be spoken about. But yeah, doing okay.
Good.
Yeah.
I think food is one of those difficult things because everybody has a complicated relationship with food. I think there's very few people that like go into adulthood with a very healthy relationship with food. I mean,
no,
you know, we use it as rewards, and we use it to like.
Yeah, I promised myself I wouldn't do that with kids, and you find yourself just gravitating towards it.
And you find yourself like when you're sad, you know, you go to food,
comfort food,
so it becomes a whole thing. So it's a tricky onion to unpeel.
But yeah, it's, you know, all of this year really has been a bit of a journey, and I think like one big step that I have taken is it's gonna be a take a shot thing soon, like stepping back from a lot of things. But I really, really am this time.
Yeah.
Like I think since sort of 2020, probably before then, I've really, really tied myself in knots with lots of different things. I think I'm finally getting to the point now where I don't like the word balance, but I'm feeling more like, if you imagine like a pool of water that's been like disturbed and all this silt and everything, I'm feeling like the water's clearing enough that I can sort of tackle.
You've turned the wave machine off.
Oh, that's all I needed to do.
Yeah. I've been trying to tell you.
I thought you were just waving.
No, well, it's difficult because you keep splashing the water and then there's the foghorn.
Yeah.
And then the wave's out and I'm like, turn it off.
Oh, the beautiful foghorn.
Thanks. And you're like, oh.
So yeah, it's rolling. But yeah, it's been a good week. And so I'm going to jump straight in with something that I've enjoyed this week.
Yeah, go for it.
Which might be yours. I'm afraid that I've stolen it.
Is it research purposes?
Yeah.
You bastard.
Well, you do it then, and I'll do a different one.
You do it.
Okay, so you introduced me to Limitless on Disney Plus, which is Chris Hemsworth, who plays Thor. And it's a limited series in which he essentially investigates ways to live better and live longer by doing these sort of insane big challenges that hone in on particular things that are helpful. So, for example, one of them is cold exposure. Another one is like strength and stamina. Another one is like fasting and sort of hunger and food and stuff. So it's really interesting because not only is it obviously, you know, it's Chris Hemsworth, so he's worked on having a strong mindset to do all the stuff that he does anyway.
Yeah,
but
you can't get into that physical shape without it.
No, and all of these challenges are difficult for him and require him to like show on camera the work, and it shows sort of his vulnerable moments.
Yeah,
it shows
refreshing to see.
Shows his strong moments, and it also shows a lot of the science behind it. So like, I think there's a danger sometimes of people watching stuff like that and being like, well, it's Chris Hemsworth, of course he can do it. But I think a lot of it in there, it shows you these stories of people who are just normal people, and how they have embraced these particular things to make their lives better. And so I think, you know, it's a fantastic show for just helping you think about things a little differently.
Yeah, I agree. It's one of those things, as in fact I said to you earlier, it's the type of thing that I need to remind myself to keep in my life, because it keeps me on track in my brain of where I like want to go or I'm heading. And I think it's so easy to get caught up with like negative thought spirals, because, you know, we're surrounded by advertisements all day, news, Instagram, TikTok, social media, all of the different things. Karens,
so many Karens, mood hoovers.
Oh God. And it's so easy to
misery Daleks.
It's so easy to just get yourself like in a spiral, even like if you're having a good day or you're in a good place in your life, because our brains are naturally wired to look for the negative as a survival tool.
Yes.
And as with anything, what you feed it and what you focus on, those things grow. And so like for me personally, I know, because of how my brain works, if I don't keep the things that I'm working on present, and I mean like within arm's reach or can see, like I never, unless I'm packing it, I never shut my journal or my planner, because the second I close it, it's gone, it's done. Yeah.
Well, it seems to have coincided as well with I've been listening to Jay Shetty's Think Like a Monk, which is obviously a lot of mindset work and stuff, and like I'm just finding that like one of the big things I've really been missing in a lot of ways is gratitude, because there are a lot of things that are very much out of my control at the minute that are, even though they're out of my control, they're affecting like the personal on a very like day-to-day basis.
Yeah, a very direct level.
And so trying to not focus too much on that which I can't and that which I am thankful for, and that, you know, sharing the gratitude. And like I used to think it was really, really woo-woo stuff, all that kind of like, thank you, like even just for the cup of tea that I've got and all that kind of stuff. But like it genuinely really has an impact in helping you sort of ground yourself in that moment, not get lost in other stuff that's going on, and just, you know, I've said this for years, but also at the same time, as I've said repeatedly, like it's very easy to go in that, and it is a constant battle, and it's a constant
really
I don't think anyone ever truly like achieves enlightenment or conquers,
it's not something this you win, it's something you maintain to the best of your ability.
And so just being thankful in those moments and having like just taking a breath and being like, this is okay, this is where you're at, and it prevents you from sort of suffering twice. So what have you enjoyed?
Well, first of all, just to clarify research purposes, I showed my son a couple of weeks ago a montage of the actor Stephen Amell, who plays Arrow in DC's Arrow, and he's in incredible shape. He fit like he can do the most insane things. He trains when he's like, I don't know if it's still shooting now, but I know that in between seasons, like he would train with parkour specialists. And the difference between his kind of muscle and Hemsworth's muscle is he can do things like the rope climb and stuff.
Show versus tell.
Yes, exactly. So I was showing Miles this because Miles has just started to learn the beauty of kind of like being able to do pull-ups and things, and also he loves the fact that his mum can't do a single pull-up and he can do like 4 on a tree like a boss. And I said, I'm going to show you something, and before I even said it, he was like, is it a half-naked man working out? And I would just like to say at this point, I've never shown it anything like that to me before. I was like, it's for research purposes, and that's become now a thing for whenever like there is
Irvin.
Yeah. So Miles is like, is this for research purposes? Okay. Well, I mean, yeah, that is definitely something I've enjoyed this week. Research purposes.
Yeah.
I think so. That is the thing I've enjoyed, but I'll move it slightly in the sense of I've started to very slowly feel my mind click back into like a positive space. Nothing has changed physically. I'm really trying to focus on what I'm putting into my body, just because the NHS is, crumbling around us, and we still are
not helping Sam.
No, we're still no closer to any answers of what's going on. That's what it stands for, not helping Sam.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. Well done. I'm so sorry. That took me way too long to realize. That was very good. Well done. And so I'm trying to focus on anything that I can do that will help me or make me feel better. So I'm starting with the basics. So food, water, like I'm attempting to go on little walks when I can. Just anything that, can help me. Yeah. And so I'm finding, like I say, things like Limitless just remind me of where my brain can sit and has sat and will sit when I just give myself the space and time to have that growth. And I think it's really important, and we've spoken about this on this podcast and personally, to keep in mind that, that's not to say that from here on out I neglect any negative and, negative in air quotes, emotions or anything like that, because I truly think that being a healthy, well-rounded human, especially when it comes to mindset, is to understand that we have those days, we have those months, we have those years when things really are like battering against you. And it's about resilience. I think that's the best you can do in those times, is that strength is resilience, and it's about being able to get back up afterwards. It's not about just saying no, nothing bad is happening, or these horrible things are happening, but I'm grateful for the cup of tea, so like everything else is fine.
Yeah.
It's about using them in a healthy way, and not, because there's such a thing as like toxic positivity.
Yeah.
Like you can take anything too far.
Yeah. Well, I had a day last week in which I was, I went out to do some work, was really sort of struggling mentally to get past some of the blocks that I've got. And so just resigned myself to do the minimum that day that needed doing. And
I was really proud of you actually for coming back and just being like, not today.
Yeah. Like it was one of those where if I was going to push through, it would have done more harm than good.
It would have definitely.
And then it's just, for people, that have experienced burnout in a big way, it's that kind of thing. You really want to push through, but you just can't. No. And it just makes it worse each day that you like pile that on and pile that on and pile that on. So yeah. I'm proud of you.
Yeah.
Push me along.
You're doing the good cookie.
Yeah.
You done the good cookie.
You done did the good cookie. And speaking of good cookies, segue. Our win from the community this week is the return of the wonderful Saskia.
Good cookie, is it a reference to her best ever Christmas present?
No,
I'm not going to show that
wasn't
on the
a
podcast.
Cookie.
No, it wasn't a cookie.
No, it wasn't.
But I love you, Saskia. And I agree, that is the best Christmas present one could possibly receive.
Saskia's back.
Yeah, she is.
And Saskia's win is that she started writing on a regular basis in the mornings before work.
Lovely.
Huge win, because there have been a lot of things in the background as well that have been pulling Saskia away, and she has done her rightly by... That wasn't good English. I'm very tired. We're recording this quite late at night. But no, she's done the good thing by allowing herself again that grace to kind of tackle what needs tackling, because we've said it before, like we love writing and writing's wonderful, but like no one's gonna die if you stop writing.
No.
So never mind.
Unless it's a weird kind of Saw situation.
Yeah,
is that where your brain went?
Kind of.
Yeah.
Saw 5 in cinema soon.
No thanks.
And with that, I guess we go into the question.
Yes. And okay, so we've focused a lot on kind of mindset and just how to deal with those things, I think, for the past couple of weeks. So I thought, let's bring it back a little bit this week. Let's do some writing tips.
Cool.
So my question / statement this week, I guess, kinda, is, I am getting around to it, I promise. Your top 3 tips to make a scene sing.
Okay, so number 1, write it good. Also, to clarify, a scene being a string of events that you detail in the book that tell part of this story. So obviously, like, it's not going to tell the whole story. But I mean, so to start very, very basic, the way that I look at scenes is very much when I'm coming up with an idea of a situation, a locale, a thing that's going to happen. The main place that I go is what is the change in this story? What am I capturing in this moment in time that is actually going to impact the characters that are in the story and the overall story itself? And for me, it really is as simple as, if you look at like the global story, you've got your beginning, your middle, and your end.
Yeah.
If you look at the 5-act structure, you've got the inciting incident, and then you've got all the conflict, the kicking out, all that kind of stuff, right up until the all the scaling action, right up to the climax and back down. And that really is a template for a story and a scene.
Yes.
So within that scene, it's really boring if somebody walks into a shop, buys something, and there's no consequence or anything for what they've done. Like, something has to happen. Something has to be made by choice. Some choice needs to be inflicted upon someone. Something needs to happen that makes it so that the characters at the end are not where they are at the beginning.
Agreed.
And that can be a good thing, like they can improve because of the scene, or that can be a negative thing. And the way I started learning about these was years ago, when I first sort of started to get into the writing games, like 2015, 2016. I used to listen to a lot of StoryGrid podcasts with Sean Coyne and Tim someone. It's been that long since I've listened to it. I can't remember his name.
Weird last name.
I know, Tim someone. And what was really cool about that was Sean Coyne was using the StoryGrid method to go through scene by scene of Tim's book and to break it down and say, what's happening here. And the good thing about the StoryGrid was it was incredibly in depth.
Yeah.
So they have it on their website. They have all these download cheat sheets. They have, Excel spreadsheets where it's like, say it's a positive scene here. Is it going into extra positive, or is it going into negative or extra negative? That's not the exact terms, but
you're lost on spreadsheet, but sure.
That's kind of the sense of it. So they kind of measure the impact in each scene of like, where does it begin and where does it end? Is it positive for the hero? Is it negative for the hero? And in breaking all of this down, it really kind of highlighted for me to avoid a flat scene. You just don't want nothing to happen in the scene. It might be very nice for people to like sit around the campfire and just chat, but like, if there isn't tension between the character, if something good isn't delivered, like it's just pointless, and it is a waste of your time as a reader. And I know that I really enjoy writing. Just, it'd be really cool to just sit and write scenes where you just like, I get to play with the characters. But it's boring for the reader. It's just boring.
It is if it's pointless.
Yeah. So my top tip really is a scene is change and changes in the scene. Like, if it's not moving anywhere, then take it out of the story, or incorporate it in a different way, or jazz it up and add some sort of action and stuff to it. The other tip, generally when it comes to scenes, and this is something that I'm not looking at your notes.
You stop copying off my notes.
Well, so it kind of relays into this actually. Is I mentioned there the story grid.
Yes.
There are 1,000 different story methodologies on how to write a story. My top tip is that they're all the same.
Yeah, they are.
There is one way to write a scene, and that is kind of as simple as change must happen. That's not to say any of these methodologies are wrong.
No, or that it's a simple thing. No,
absolutely. So all of these methodologies exist. Like, you've got the books there, I won't go into them, but like the Snowflake Method, you've got StoryGrid, you've got Jay Thorne and Zach Bohannon have done the 3-story method with the 3 C's, all these different things.
Yep.
All of these are different lenses to look at the same things to match with people's different brains, so that you can process it in a different way. So
exactly,
StoryGrid really helped me confirm my understanding of the fundamentals. But it's way too detailed for me. Like, I am not a person who will go through my scene and track it down and
feels like paint by numbers.
Even if, because you can go through it in hindsight and kind of like use it as an editing tool. So once you've written your story, go, okay, does this all work?
Yeah.
For me, it really is like I think Jay and Zach's method are probably the closest to simplicity that I find that works for me, and that is choice. No, oh, I have the notes here. Wait, conflict, choice, and consequence. So, what is the friction in the scene?
Yeah.
What is the choice that a character must make, and then what's the consequence of that choice?
Yeah.
And again, that can scale from something as simple as like, what color yo-yo you're going to have, and how does that impact the story? To holy crap, like which way do we run away from this flaming volcano?
You know, green is illegal in Asfaltabad.
Exactly, in Asfaltabad.
Yeah.
And so, tip number 1, scene is change. So, tip number 2, all of these methodologies, find one that works for you.
Yeah.
Read them, understand them, but it all comes back to the basic beginning, middle, and end. Conflict, choice, and consequence. It's because I never get it's because I can't remember in the right order. But then this is also my point, because I learn this stuff and then I internalize it.
Well, this is the thing. Sorry to interrupt you, but like as you were talking, you were reminding me very much of one of the like big lessons that we were taught at drama school, which is you do all of this prep work, and you know, like literally there is a methodology of breaking down the script where like beat by beat, sentence by sentence, word by word, you choose how you are going to deliver that word. There is I have a like I think it's called the action thesaurus, which has all different verbs in it, so you can choose sentence by sentence how you want your character to deliver these 2 words. And it gets that detailed. And you do the work, and then you throw the fucking thing out and you forget that you've done the work because you've internalized it, like you say. And then you can, because if you're like constantly looking, at the worksheet, and then it's going to feel like you've been looking at a worksheet when you write it.
Yeah.
Sorry,
it's the path of learning, and there's there's like a scale of 4 things in which to begin with, it's unconscious incompetence. So you're not aware of the things that you don't know.
Yes, I live there.
And and then it's conscious incompetence. So you're aware that you don't know the thing, and so you're going to take the steps to do the thing. And then you have conscious competence, where you begin to understand the thing that you're trying to understand. And then you have unconscious competence, in which you just do things instinctively. So if you think of this as like driving a car, and again, like just for clarity, we're talking about
dolphin sprockets.
We're talking about building scenes, but we're also talking about writing in general and the process of learning writing. Before you start writing, you have no idea what's going on. You don't know like any terms, any terminology, anything like that. You're like, oh my god, this is weird. I don't know the things I don't know. When you come to learning, you start to become aware of the things that you don't know, which is kind of what this process is. You know, you're going through the books, you're flicking through the stuff, you're understanding structure, methodology. You're reading books in a different way to begin understanding how these lessons apply. Conscious competence, you're starting to go, okay, I know this. I'm beginning to develop an understanding. I can do this, but I'm still very, very aware that I'm thinking while I'm doing this.
You've still got your flashcards.
Yeah. So like when you're driving, it's sort of, learning to drive, it's the later parts of the lesson where you're like, I know what to do, but I'm still not like, I'm still thinking about it.
Yeah.
And then now, I've been driving for, oh God, don't do this then, 15 years, Jesus Christ. I'm at a point in which I don't even think about it, because I've had enough practice and learned enough. And that's kind of like where I am with scene building. Like I
was about to be such a bitch then, and I decided not to be.
Don't. And so I've written enough scenes to kind of know the feel of how these go.
Yes.
But yeah, it's a process, and as I say, like none of the methodologies are necessarily right, nor are they wrong. It's finding the ones that work best for you to help tell your story. And we kind of touched on this before, but like there are specific ones for different areas. So like Romance in the Beat goes much more into sort of the structure of that story, and then Hero's Journey focuses more on like fantasy and like big hero story and stuff. But yeah, so that's number 2. Number 3 is I didn't write any notes for this one, really. Again, this is me
off the cuff, man, because you just know it.
Unconscious competence.
Yep.
You made me forget what it was again. Number 3 is that's it. Kind of links to the last one as well. Trying not to get too bogged down in details. The truth of the matter is, when people talk about the difference between scenes and chapters, I don't really know.
Well, because like you can have multiple scenes in a chapter, but you can have multiple chapters.
That's not how I view it in my head, or how I understand it. Like I know exactly what it means, but for me, like I don't really differentiate, because I see personally, when I'm writing and thinking stuff, I see chapters.
Yes.
And they might
same.
have multiple scenes in
I
them,
do.
which is fair enough. But like, I never in my head think granular enough to a scene
Yeah,
level.
no,
I
I
kind
know what
of,
you mean.
because I try and keep a lot of like the larger story and then
Mhm.
just move the action forward.
Mhm.
But like, it all comes down again to structure of whatever genre you're in, however you want to write. But you look at like a book like Hunger Games, it's very much written. A chapter is essentially the scene.
Yes.
Like a whole scene is a chapter. You look at people like Stephen King, and he has chapters or big sections in which it's a series of scenes that make up a really big section.
Mhm.
Like he'll have his like chapter name and then like 1, 2, 3, and they're not on like separate pages. They kind of all bleed into each other because they're just
Jesus.
isolated scenes.
Yeah.
Which I really like, to be fair, because it's got a weird kind of flow to it.
I've never read any King.
Fair.
It is something that I'm interested in, but I'm terrified of.
Well, there's a few authors that tackle it in that approach.
Mhm.
But again, the point being, like, if you have a bigger chapter, you can break that down and just have, you know, a scene here, a couple of scenes here, or whatever.
Mhm.
Like, personally, for me, just don't get bogged down in detail because the story is king.
Agreed.
As long as you've got a beginning, middle, and end to whatever it is you're writing, as long as
Mhm.
there's that choice, that conflict, that consequence in there, as long as it feels like the story's moving forward. And that really, when I first started writing, I did not understand what that meant.
Mhm.
Like, I could not in my head. It's just like, does it serve the story? Yeah, it's in my book.
Yeah.
Like, it wouldn't be in there if it didn't serve the story.
Yes, it would. I have read a lot of books.
A lot of my stuff.
I mean, I've read a lot of books where you're like, this is unnecessary.
Yeah.
This doesn't need to be here. This is boring. This is too long.
Yeah.
I'm losing interest. This is like,
I've read quite a few. Like,
you're wanking. Stop it.
Jesus Christ. But yeah, no, absolutely. So yeah, that's kind of my umbrella view on the things. What are your tips?
Well,
give us your 2 cents. 3
my
cents.
2 cents. Before I go into it, I completely agree with what you said. Story is king. And I am going to quote Ms. Kendrick.
Ooh.
Yeah. Who, on someone asking a question about kind of like how many words should be in a scene, or how many, like, you know, how many words should be in the book, how many chapters, how long should the chapters be? And she said, honestly, I don't give a fuck.
Mm-hmm.
The story will be as long as the story should be.
Mm-hmm.
And like that, there is so much truth in that. Like, she is a very raw storyteller, and I don't mean that in her ability. I mean in the sense of, if it serves the story, she's all about it. She doesn't give a shit about anything else.
No.
And I think like there's quite a few people that could take a lesson from that, because readers don't care how many words are in your book.
No, this is why I've started taking like novella off of my books, because that's more a thing for writers than it is for readers. Like, readers don't know what a novella is, really. No. But it's that thing of, again, kind of coming back to the unconscious incompetence thing. When you're beginning to learn to write and when you're beginning to look at scenes and understand scenes, I've started to compare this a lot to like music.
Yeah.
So like when you're learning how to play an instrument, you don't just start by like playing the keys because you don't understand, you know, harmonics, you don't understand arpeggios, all that kind of stuff. But you begin to understand what the 13 notes do and how to use them in a certain order by copying other people and how they play. You read their music, you understand them, and you learn the basic format of what that is. Once you know enough, and once it's, you know, reached that point of unconscious competence, you can then play and you can then do what you want to. But if you're very, very early in the journey and you're getting the impression that we're saying like just follow your heart or whatever, learn this stuff. Yeah, you have to know the rules to be able to break them. You have to know the rules to be able to play with them. Like, you know, you have to pass your driving test before you can do a wheelie in an Asda car park.
Yeah, you can't just go around doing donuts
and endos.
Bloody endos. Anyway.
What are your 3?
So my 3 are, and I will say what they are and then I'll go into each one individually. So ground the scene, act, react, and POV. POV. So number 1, grounding your scene. And this is something that's really important to do for your reader. And what I mean by grounding the scene is like, where is it? So like, where is the scene? Like, what has just happened?
It's just context.
Yeah, it is like what's like recently happened in the characters that are in that scene, like what is the time of day, what's the weather like, and there is a myriad of ways of doing that. Like you can literally be like, Tommy was like, 4 days into the trek, Tommy was starting to see like mirages on the horizon as the sun lowered. Like already we know, like he's still fucking walking from last time. He's hungry, he's thirsty, he's starting to hallucinate. The sun's going down, it's almost nighttime. So it's probably pretty hot at the minute. He's not in a good place. But it literally, you can just, by talking about the stars in the sky, we know it's nighttime.
Yeah.
You don't have to be like, it was 4:58 on September the 5th.
Yeah. I have read a few stories in which it's taken about 3 pages before I've kind of started to understand where they are and what's going on. I've had to flick back to be like, what? Yeah.
Because it really can pull you out as a reader.
Well, you're painting a picture, aren't you? And you have to, I mean, I say you have to, like, it's not hard and fast rule to open the first sentence by like looking at the bigger picture.
Yeah.
But at least somehow get to it.
Yeah.
Like somewhat quickly.
Yeah. And like, I think there are a few exceptions to the rule. So for example, if one of your characters is, I don't know, like being held in a dungeon, then it plays to your advantage as a writer to not know what time it is, to not know like how long they've been there. But then you can play with that, and that becomes
the reader still needs to know that they don't know. Yes.
So you still have to ground it. But what I'm saying is you don't have to mention the time or anything like that, because they're in a place where they don't know any of that thing, and their psychology will be going crazy. And there
are shortcuts. I mean, if you're halfway through a book and earlier in the book you've mentioned a tavern in which there's, I don't know, like a faun behind the bar called Phil.
Yeah, Phil the Faun.
Philatites. Then later on in the scene, if later on in the book, if you suddenly just like, oh, he looked at Phil, like you assume that they're in the bar.
Yeah.
Like you can do those inferences and let the reader make their mind up, but at least have that initial introduction to help them along the way.
And I will say as well, especially like for me, I'm still a relatively like young writer, as in my experience, not my age.
So that makes me
your age,
the elder.
So a lot of the time I will, like when I'm going back through my work, I will make sure that I have like on a post-it note like a few of these things to make sure that each scene has something that kind of so that's always something a good thing to check when you're editing.
Yes, 100%.
Okay, so the next one is act or react. So much like you were saying, each scene has to have a point, it has to have a purpose.
Yeah.
Are the characters in this scene being proactive? Are they acting of their own volition to do something? Have they made a plan to storm the keep, for example? Or are they reacting to something that has happened to them? Either of those things, there is conflict in that. There is, a lot of room for play and all the rest of it, but there has to be some kind of movement. And movement doesn't mean like physically moving.
Yeah.
Like the movement can literally be, if it's a first person thing, it could be an inner monologue, but it has to be like dynamic.
She started off dreaming and then she woke up with a realization.
Yeah, like that
as a consequence of the dream.
Yeah, there has to be like, action and reaction. And in a book, like in real life, sometimes we make choices, sometimes choices are made for us. And so that you have to know like what's going on in that way. I think it's really important to have that kind of I just went to sleep for a second.
That's a whole book, isn't it? Like the entire book is just a string of reacting and acting.
Yeah, as life is.
Yeah.
And I would say that kind of, particularly if you're going on like a hero's journey or a heroine's journey, that kind of thing.
One day I will.
As you get closer to the end, you're going to want the hero or the heroine of the piece to make more of those proactive choices, even if they're reacting to something, because that is how we grow as humans. We take the things that we can't change, but we choose how to react to them. And in choosing your reaction, that is a proactive action, as opposed to a knee-jerk reaction to something that has just happened.
Yeah. And bringing it back to the story structure conversation we had on an episode a few months ago, like you say, the rising action is one of the biggest steps in the 5-act structure. You've got your inciting incident into the rising action. And with each obstacle, each situation that your protagonist hits, it has to increase. Oh, excuse me, an alarm's going off.
Unbelievable.
But it should, as it goes on, like you say, it gets more difficult and more difficult. Yes. I avoided saying harder and harder then. More difficult. So if you look at like something as simple as Hercules, like the film, he starts off like his first task is to go to an island and find Philoctetes. That's not really like a difficult task. Like, well, exactly. He has to like fuck up a cyclops and then dive into like a pool of dead people. And spoilers if you haven't seen Hercules. Yeah, but
say bless my soul, Hercules on a roll.
Exactly. And then he got eaten on that roll. But
with mejones.
But that's the point. Like it gets more difficult, it gets more difficult, it gets more difficult. Like Hunger Games, the first choice is I will volunteer, which is, I know the consequences of that are huge, but that actual choice, just being able to go, yes, that's, and it's just got huge implications, and it gets more difficult and harder.
It gets harder and
harder and harder.
Yeah. And then I would say the third important thing to remember is, whose point of view is this from?
Yes, big one.
Like, it's so important, like, to know whose lens you are looking at the scene through. Because if the reader doesn't know within the first sentence, at least the first freaking paragraph.
I've had this as well, where I've really gotten lost.
So confusing. Yeah. So confusing. You need to know who you are with. So, like, for example, Lord of the Rings is the first, or even like the Wheel of Time. Like, I'm thinking of epic fantasy at the minute, where you have a big cast of characters. It starts off small and you generally stay with the same person for quite a while. And then as their world gets bigger, the reader's world gets bigger, and, parties separate. And you have chunks of the book where in Lord of the Rings, for example, Merry and Pippin are together for a while. And then like Frodo and Sam, and Aragorn and Legolas and Gimli, and you have these huge sections where you're just following these characters. You need to know immediately when you start a new chapter, when you start a new scene, I need to know who I'm with. And so there are some like really easy ways to do that. Number one, you could start off, this is very simple, you could start off the chapter saying Sam and Frodo. Okay, cool, I know who I'm with. Or if you don't want to start off every like scene or chapter by like name dropping the characters, then it's your job as a writer to make sure that these characters are so 3D and have like very specific things that anchor them to them. So for example, I'm re-listening to the Wheel of Time series at the moment, and there are some characters that have such a unique voice. I don't need to know their name, because I know who it is as soon as I'm reading. Like, there's a character, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but I know who he is. He's a captain, and he's fond of saying like, I won't give my mother a free ride, or like, bless my aged grandmother. Like he's always talking about like, I'm a fair man, but I wouldn't give my own mother a free ride on my boat. Like, so you just know from turns of phrases, from like how you write them, how they react, who they are. But like, for the love of God, make sure your reader knows within, I would say within the first line.
And there are
who the fuck you're with.
There are formatting ways to do that as well. I've seen it where people have put sort of embellishments in the chapter headings. So like by the numbers, it'll be like a rose for a character, or like a thorn for another one. Like I've seen people do that. But it's like, you can write scenes in which you're switching perspectives a lot between different characters. It's very difficult to do well. I've known a few people that do, but for simplicity's sake, it does behoove you to, as you say, sort of know who that character is from the beginning, and kind of really, because again, I can't remember what book it was, and I wouldn't name it anyway, like on here if I knew what it was. I do remember getting to like particular chapters and thinking that I was reading someone and being like, well, this is a bit strange, and then it introduces another character. And on that note as well, if you haven't introduced another POV for like the first half of the book, and then you suddenly introduce a new POV, this is more important than ever, because like people need to know.
And like I say, for me, my frame of reference with this is more like epic fantasy, where, as I say, you usually start off with a more singular POV, and then as the party breaks up into like separate missions, or for whatever happens, we follow different POVs. Number one, like you say, it's more important than ever, because we need to know that the format's changed. As a reader, we need to understand, okay, I'm no longer following Jimmy, I'm now following Sarah.
Well, look at the difference between Aragorn and Pippin.
Yeah, and you could read Pippin as Aragorn if they don't tell you, and you could be like, "What the fuck is happening?
Why is he up a tree?"
It is so confusing if you don't know. And I would say as well, if you are going to introduce POVs later in the game, like for example, if you are writing an epic fantasy, do it at a point that makes sense.
Yeah.
So like when you're following Frodo and Sam, you know you're following Frodo and Sam, but you're always following Frodo. It's through Frodo, and it's not until they break up that you can see it from someone else's perspective. So like do it at a point that makes sense, otherwise you're going to confuse the shit out of your readers. So to recap, ground the scene, act and react, and POV. And I've just written a few little notes down here, which is mostly really agreeing with what you said. So each scene is its own story, which means that each scene needs to have like a beginning, middle, and end. And yeah, so conflict and resolution, cliffhangers, answer some questions that you've opened in other scenes, other chapters, and open some other questions. Never answer all of the questions. No. Because that's a guaranteed way to why read now?
Give people a chance to drop off.
You've removed all of the conflict. So yeah, there are some other things to keep in mind. But I think for the most part, like from my perspective, like just bear your reader in mind. Because if you remove that conflict for them, as in the sense of the conflict between them and being able to get into your book, they're going to read it and enjoy it more if they know where they are, who they're following, and like why this scene matters.
Yeah, because you want to connect with the character. That's the whole point. Like it's the emotional pull of a reader going, I want to know what happened to this person, that keeps someone reading. And it's worth adding as well, I think, that a lot of this evaluation is best served in editing.
Yes,
like we say a lot on here, write that first draft just as best you can, like arguably as quick as you can, whatever that looks like, and then worry about a lot of this stuff in post, because it might be a case of, you really want to write this scene that you find out later serves no purpose. Cut it later, and then you've got like bonus extra for your readers and things. But like so much of, you don't want to bog yourself down in the evaluation during that first draft. No, in my opinion.
And I think as well, so you're definitely at the, let me see if I can remember, the subconscious competence, whereas I'm at the conscious competence stage. So for me, editing takes a lot longer because I'm going to comb through everything, and I'm going to make sure that like each round of edits I'm focusing on a different thing, which means that my first drafts are a lot messier and they take a lot longer to rein in, where you've been writing for a long time, and in that time you've written a lot more than most people. So your first drafts, I've read them and they make me sick, are a lot cleaner, but they make me sick in the sense of like, you have put in the work to get to that point. I'm not being like, you're just naturally talented, you arsehole. Like, you've worked your arse off.
I've still got my first story
to get to that point. So the more you work, the more subconscious these things become, the less then you have to worry about these things in editing, because they will just become natural to you as you are writing.
Yeah, a lot of this stuff sounds really intimidating, especially when you're sort of earlier in your journey. But yeah, just remember that this work pays off.
Yeah,
stick with it, learn the things, really try and like take your time and understand. Again, like if you look at driving, when you first get in the car, you don't just like hit the gas and go. You kind of go like, oh my god, what do these three pedals do? Okay,
what the fuck is the biting point?
Yeah,
where's the dolphin's bucket?
Where the hell is the windscreen wiper?
Yeah.
God, yeah. I remember getting my first car and getting in the car and being like, I had to turn the lights on, and it was like, because it was an old car, it was a very weird, different way, and I was like, still fine. But yeah, good question. I like that one. And obviously, like it's fundamental. I like that we're kind of getting more granular. We've started on some quite big concepts and stuff. Yeah. To look at more of this kind of stuff. So yeah, for resources, what's your top resource for people?
So I have these books here. And I found these invaluable actually when I first started reading up. So the one that serves the exact question that we've asked today is How to Write a Dynamite Scene Using the Snowflake Method by Randy Ingemanson, is I believe how you say it. I shall hold it up for the camera if you are watching. And like the Snowflake Method for me personally made a lot of sense. And if you don't know what the Snowflake Method is, I also have here with some sticky notes how to write using the Snowflake Method. And this is it's a fun book in the sense of he shows you how to do it by teaching it through a story. It's very, but it's very cool. And it's kind of, like you say, some things work for people, some things don't. But this is like, basically you start off with one line and you end up with your story through different things. And so then when I found out that he'd done like how to write a scene using it, and it covers everything, and it is very detailed. But again, like the original, it basically, you start off very small and you add to it, because his whole shtick is that, like, if I asked you to draw a perfect complex snowflake, there's a name for it, I can't think of it, you would struggle. But if I asked you to draw one triangle and then another triangle, and after a time we would have that perfect shape.
I mean, it's a perfect euphemism for a book.
Yeah. So like for me personally, and I'll put it in the show notes, these two books out of any other kind of writing books have made the most sense for me.
Yes.
And I really will underline that, because some people will read that and it won't make any sense to them, or it will feel way too convoluted or not strict enough. But yeah, so that's kind of my top resources for this. And yours, you already mentioned, but do you want to?
Yeah, I would recommend 3-Story Method by Jay Thorne and Zach Bohannon. I think that's very because it came out a couple of years ago, so it's got a lot of it looks at a lot of the other methods and how they apply to kind of how they put this methodology together. It's very very current. Story Grid again is a fantastic resource. I'm pretty sure the podcast is still going. I'm not 100% sure, but I know that Sean Coyne is still doing a lot of editing stuff with Story Grid. And then I would say primarily the way that I've learned a lot of this stuff is just by consciously paying attention to what I'm reading and what I'm watching. If you watch TV shows, if you watch films and things, and really pay attention to like a moment or like the scene that they have, like whether in a room, what happens when they flash to another situation, it teaches you that, you know, something's happening all the time. Especially if you're watching soap operas, it's just drama to drama to the point that it's quite aggressively annoying.
Yeah, agreed.
But yeah, just really take a moment as you're reading. If you finish a chapter and just go, okay, what happened here? Or if you're watching a film, like pause it, piss off your partner, and go, what happened here? So I just want to watch the fucking film.
What's the point of it as well?
What was the point?
If you can't, like, when you finish watching a section or finish reading a chapter, if you can't figure out what the point of it was, then it's probably.
And the cool thing is,
necessary.
once you do a lot of this work, you begin to know how films end very, very early on. Yeah, it's a cool party trick to piss off everyone in the room.
I knew Bruce Willis was dead.
I've not seen Pulp Fiction yet.
I didn't. I'm so sorry.
Awesome.
I thought you'd watched Kill Bill already.
Yeah. So that is top tips on writing a scene.
Yeah.
And yeah, I guess that brings us to the end. So just a plug from us is by all means, if you want to find a really cool writing community,
just mosey on over.
Just mosey on over
just
to.
A little mosey.
That's a shimmy, isn't it? Is that a mosey?
ActivatedAuthors.com,
where you can join our community free of goddamn charge.
Free of charge.
Just jump in, meet a load of other really cool writers doing some amazing things over there. If you fancy getting involved in weekly sprints and other stuff behind the scenes, you can join AA Plus, which is our paid membership, where you can jump in and get a bunch of added benefits. And
happy ending.
And yeah, that's where we'll leave it today. So there's nothing left to do other than say a massive thank you to you, the listeners, for tuning in. We appreciate you and the time you choose to spend with us each and every week.
Yeah.
And if you're looking to level up your writing and activate your author career, head on over to https://www.activatedauthors.com to find out all about our community, our resources, and everything else that we've got going on. One more time from myself and from Dan. We will see you next week.
Rude.
I used to see you doing a very good impression of me.
Is it?
It is.
I mean, kill me dead. I'm glad that website ended. Goodbye.
Bye.
Activate your energy.